Let me tell you something that might sting a little. Nobody cares about your struggles. Not really. And before you take offense, hear me out. It's not that people are heartless or unkind. It's not that they wouldn't help you if you were drowning. Most people are good. Most people would offer a hand if they saw you in pain. But in the grand scheme of life, in the busy, overstimulated, constantly moving world we live in, most people are just trying to get through their own day. They're trying to survive their own private battles. They are not ignoring you out of cruelty. They're just overwhelmed, like you are, like I am, like everyone is. People don't typically remember the nights you stayed up crying, the mornings you forced yourself out of bed despite the weight on your chest, or the 1,000 invisible sacrifices you made to be where you are. They don't see the mess in the background, the anxiety in the silence, or the trembling in your voice. They see what's in front of them. The result, the product. They see what you did, not what it cost you. And for a long time, I thought that was unfair. But now I realize that's the point. You see, there's a strange paradox in life. The world rarely applauds effort, but it always rewards impact. The sweat, the hours, the tears. All of that is invisible. But the outcomes you produce, the value you create, the way you affect others, that's what people notice. That's what makes people listen. And maybe that sounds cold, but it's actually empowering. Because it means you don't have to wait for validation. You don't have to beg for someone to acknowledge your struggle before you can feel strong. The truth is, your struggles do matter, but not in the way you think they do. They matter because they shape you, not because they impress others. No one is going to hand you a trophy for suffering. No one's going to say, wow, you were emotionally wrecked for 6 months, you win. That's not how it works. People are moved by what you become because of what you went through, not by the pain itself. Pain without purpose is just noise. Pain with growth is transformation. Think about someone you admire, really admire. Maybe it's a leader, a teacher, a parent, an artist, an entrepreneur. I guarantee you that their story isn't defined by how much they suffered. It's defined by what they did with that suffering. We connect to people not through their wounds, but through their healing. Not because they fell, but because they got back up. And here's where it gets real. The moment you stop needing everyone to understand your struggle is the moment you become powerful. Not because the pain disappears, but because you stop waiting for someone to give you permission to rise. You stop waiting for a spotlight. You stop waiting for the applause. You start focusing on what you can control, what you build, how you show up, how you treat others, even when you're tired, even when no one's watching. We live in a world that measures success in visible metrics. Money, followers, titles, aesthetics. But what's invisible? The internal battles, the quiet perseverance, the courage to keep going when nothing makes sense. That's where the real leadership happens. That's where integrity is formed. And the irony is, the more you grow through struggle without needing the world to validate it, the more the world starts to notice. Not because you demanded attention, but because you became someone worth following. People often say, no one checked on me. And it hurts, of course it hurts. But you have a choice. You can either be bitter that no one checked on you, or you can become the kind of person who checks on others. Because leadership isn't about being seen, it's about seeing. Seeing the ones who are still invisible. Seeing the people who are fighting quiet battles like you once did. That's how cycles change. That's how empathy is born. And that's how you turn pain into purpose. Nobody cares about your struggles. Not because they don't care about you, but because they can't see what you haven't turned into something yet. Struggle is the raw material. It's not the story. It's the setup. It's the beginning of the story, not the end. What you do with it, how you carry it, who you become through it. That's what makes the difference. So no, the world may not care that you cried yourself to sleep last night. It may not care that you're fighting demons no one else can see. But here's the good news. You don't need the world to care. You just need to remember why you care, why it matters, why you keep showing up even when it's hard. That's what gives your story weight. That's what gives your life direction. That's what inspires others, not through sympathy, but through strength. You are not defined by how broken you've been. You are defined by how you rebuild, quietly, patiently, purposefully. You are defined by the impact you create despite the wounds, not because of them. And if people don't see the struggle, that's okay. Let them see the strength. Because in the end, you won't be remembered for what you endured. You'll be remembered for what you built from it. We've been told to avoid pain. We've been taught to seek comfort, to chase ease, to look for the quickest path with the least resistance. And yet, if you study anyone who has built anything meaningful, whether it's a business, a movement, a relationship, or a personal transformation, the common thread is always the same. They struggled. They suffered. They endured something that made most people quit, because struggle isn't the enemy of growth. It's the requirement. Growth has a price, and that price is struggle. The irony is that we keep asking life to give us the prize first. Confidence, clarity, courage, and then we promise we'll go after the hard stuff. But life says no, go through the hard stuff first. Then you'll earn the prize. You don't become brave by avoiding fear. You become brave by doing it scared. You don't become strong by dodging pressure. You become strong by facing resistance. You don't gain clarity by waiting for certainty. You gain clarity by walking through confusion. It's easy to believe that struggle means we're off track, that we're doing something wrong, that if we were smarter, more talented, more worthy, things would be easier. But that's a myth. If anything, struggle is often a sign you're doing something that matters. Because anything worthwhile, anything with real meaning, comes with friction. When your values collide with the expectations of others, that's friction. When your dreams outgrow your current reality, that's friction. So when your old self has to be left behind for your future self to rise, that's friction. And that friction, that's what shapes you. Think of it like muscle. You can't grow a muscle without first tearing it. The tiny tears in the fibers caused by pressure and resistance are what create space for growth. Your body adapts because of the struggle, not in spite of it. And your character works the same way. Resilience doesn't show up in calm waters. It's born in the storm. Patience isn't learned in the waiting. It's learned in the not knowing, in the enduring. Wisdom doesn't come from easy wins. It comes from losses, from lessons, from reflection. But here's the hard part. There's no guarantee. That's what makes struggle so difficult. You could give everything you have and still fall short. You could pour your soul into something and not be recognized. You could take the risk, speak the truth, show up every day and still feel like you're behind. That's the truth no one wants to admit. And yet, doing it anyway is what separates those who merely dream from those who make things happen. Because in the end, it's not the outcome that defines us, it's the process. It's who we become in the process. It's how we carry ourselves through the struggle, with integrity, with compassion, with perseverance. People often say it's not personal, it's business. But the best leaders, the most trusted humans, they make it personal. They care deeply, they bring their full selves. And caring deeply comes with a cost. Heartache, disappointment, vulnerability. But that's also where meaning is born. Those people are not afraid of hard work. They're afraid of meaningless work. They're afraid of effort that leads nowhere. So the real question isn't, can you endure the struggle? It's, does the struggle lead somewhere worth going? When the answer is yes, when the struggle is in service of a purpose bigger than yourself, it becomes bearable, even beautiful. Because now you're not just suffering, you're building. You're growing into someone the world needs. The people who inspire us most aren't the ones who lived easy lives. They're the ones who turned pain into purpose. The ones who made meaning out of what broke them. And it's not because they were special. It's because they didn't run from the fire. They stood in it long enough to become someone else. Someone stronger, someone clearer, someone who could help others find the path too. So when you struggle, don't ask, why me? Ask, what's this trying to teach me? Don't ask, how do I make this easier? Ask, how do I get stronger? Don't say, I shouldn't feel this way. Say, I feel this way because I care. That's the beginning of transformation, not in removing the pain, but in reframing it. And one day, not today, but maybe someday soon, someone will come to you in their own season of struggle. They'll be tired, confused, lost. They'll look at you, not because you're perfect, but because you get it. And you'll be able to say, not with judgment, but with empathy, I know it's hard. I've been there, but you can do this. I'm proof. That's when your struggle turns into service. That's when it stops being just about you. Because the moment your pain becomes a bridge for someone else's healing, it's no longer just pain. It's purpose. And maybe that's why we struggle. Not just to grow, but to grow into someone who can light the way for others. Struggle isn't a detour from your path. It is the path. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you stop fighting reality, the faster you gain the power to change it. And then, slowly, something remarkable happens. You stop resenting the hardship. You start rising with it. And in doing so, you become exactly the kind of person you once needed. And that, more than any applause, any title, any recognition, that is what makes the struggle worth it. There comes a point in life when you realize that not everyone will understand your journey. And that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's necessary. Because the goal is not to get the world to understand you. The goal is to become the kind of person who doesn't need to be understood in order to keep moving forward. We've been conditioned to believe that our value is tied to being seen. That if people don't acknowledge our effort, if they don't validate our pain, if they don't understand our why, well then maybe we're doing something wrong. But that belief traps us. It locks us into performing instead of growing, into explaining instead of evolving. And slowly we become more invested in how we're perceived than in who we're becoming. There is a quiet power that emerges when you stop needing to be understood. When you no longer have to justify your path. When you no longer explain why you're walking away from things that no longer serve you or stepping into unknowns that others think are reckless. Because here's the truth. Most people will never understand your transformation while they're still committed to their own comfort. And they're not supposed to. It's not their path. It's yours. Growth is personal. It's intimate. And often, it's invisible. You're not going to get a standing ovation for choosing discipline over distraction. No one is clapping for you when you say no to toxic patterns, when you quietly stay up at night reworking your vision. When you hold your tongue in a meeting because wisdom is learning not to react to everything that offends you. No one sees that. And they don't have to. That's not weakness. That's strength. We live in a world that worships noise. But real change, lasting change, happens in silence. In the small, unglamorous decisions. The ones no one praises. The ones that don't trend. That's where transformation happens. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. Not in being understood, but in being true. You'll have moments when you wish someone would just say, I get it. I see what you're doing. I know how hard this is. And sometimes they will, but more often they won't. And in those moments, you'll be tempted to turn back, to shrink, to play small again, because it's lonely to keep going when no one's clapping. But here's what most people miss. The applause was never the point. The clarity is. It's not about being seen, it's about seeing yourself clearly enough to keep going. You grow when your purpose becomes louder than your need for approval. You grow when your vision matters more than your comfort. When your conviction matters more than consensus. Because if you need everyone to get it, you'll wait forever. People see the world through their own lens. They project their limitations onto your potential. Not because they're malicious, because they're human. Because your decision to rise reminds them that they're still standing still. Your courage disrupts their complacency. And rather than examine that discomfort, many will question you. You can't let that stop you. You can't keep explaining your wings to people who are committed to crawling. If you're waiting for permission, you'll stay grounded. And if you spend your energy convincing people that your dream is valid, You'll never have the energy left to actually build it. There's a beautiful kind of peace that comes when you finally decide that you're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to live truthfully, to lead with integrity, to become whole. And that wholeness, that's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's not always even noticed, but it's powerful. Because it means you no longer have to outsource your confidence. You don't need external affirmation to know you're on the right path. You feel it. You know it. And eventually, the right people will find you, not because you shouted the loudest, but because you moved with quiet certainty. People are drawn to authenticity. But authenticity requires the risk of being misunderstood. It means showing up without pretending, without performing, without over-explaining. It means standing in your truth even when it confuses people, even when it disappoints them, even when it threatens the identity they've built for you. Let them be confused, let them whisper, let them guess. That's not your business. Your business is to keep growing, to keep healing, to keep building the life that makes sense to you. Because in the end, you're the one who has to live with the consequences of your choices, not the people who judge them. The strength you build in those moments, when you feel alone, misunderstood, dismissed, is the kind of strength no one can take from you. It's not borrowed, it's not dependent, it's yours. It's earned in silence, in struggle, in solitude. And it becomes your anchor, so that when the storms come, and they will, you don't need anyone to throw you a rope. You've already built your foundation. Sometimes people will misunderstand your boundaries as selfishness. They'll see your silence as arrogance, your clarity as rebellion. But you don't owe anyone a version of yourself that keeps them comfortable. Your job is to live aligned, to grow honestly, to honor the voice inside you that says there's more, even if no one else hears it yet. You are not here to be understood, you are here to become someone you're proud of, to become someone who lives with purpose. And purpose isn't loud, it doesn't beg for attention, it doesn't need to explain itself. Purpose just is. Quiet, steady, unshakable. And that's who you're becoming. Not someone who needs to be seen to believe in themselves, but someone who moves forward even when no one's watching. Someone who creates meaning even when no one claps. Someone who chooses growth even when it's hard to explain. Because in the end, understanding is nice, but strength is necessary. And the world doesn't need more people who fit in. It needs more people who are strong enough to stand alone until others are ready to walk beside them. We all have a story, a past, a history shaped by pain, joy, confusion, setbacks, and breakthroughs. But here's the truth no one tells you early enough. Your value isn't in what you've been through. It's in what you choose to do with it. We live in a time where sharing our stories has become currency. And in many ways, that's powerful. Vulnerability is human. Openness creates connection. But there's a line we sometimes cross without realizing, where we start to believe that what happened to us is the most important thing about us, that the hardships, the trauma, the heartbreak, the loss, that these events alone define who we are and how we deserve to be seen. But your experiences, no matter how painful or formative, are not your identity. They are your raw material. They are what you're given. The real value, the part that actually matters, is how you take those raw materials and create something meaningful from them. Because experience alone doesn't build character. Choices do. There are people who've faced unimaginable challenges and emerged with grace, empathy, and strength. And there are others who've had similar challenges and become bitter, closed off, or cynical. The difference isn't what they went through. The difference is what they chose to do next. That's where the power is. Not in the pain, but in the response. Everyone has scars. Some visible, most invisible. The scars are not shameful. They're proof that you've survived. But survival isn't the end goal. Transformation is. The story isn't finished when you get through something hard. That's just the middle. The most powerful stories continue after the pain, when a person decides that they will not just survive, but grow. When they stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what can I build with this? That shift from victim to creator is what changes lives. Because when you recognize that your value is in your response, you stop needing the past to explain everything about your present. You stop needing others to validate the depth of your pain before you give yourself permission to move forward. You take ownership quietly, powerfully. The truth is, your story isn't just about what happened to you. It's about how you showed up afterward, how you kept going when no one clapped, how you chose kindness even when life wasn't kind to you, how you held on to your values when everything in you wanted to give into anger or apathy. And the beautiful thing is, you get to decide what your pain produces. You can turn wounds into wisdom, loss into compassion, failure into discipline. You can take what tried to break you and use it as a foundation. Not because the pain was fair, not because it was deserved, but because you chose to find meaning in it. You don't have to build something monumental. You don't have to start a movement, write a book, or launch a foundation. Maybe the thing you build is your own peace. Maybe it's the way you show up in your relationships now. Maybe it's the kind of parent, friend, or leader you become. Maybe it's the quiet resilience you pass on to someone who desperately needs to see that healing is possible. You don't have to broadcast your journey for it to be meaningful. You don't have to prove how hard it was. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is quietly live a life your past never prepared you for. That's redemption. That's value. And that's power. But don't confuse this for perfection. This isn't about pretending you're over it. Healing isn't linear. Growth isn't tidy. There are days when the past will come knocking again. That's okay. What matters is that now you meet it differently. You've grown, you've gained perspective, and you know that what happened doesn't get to dictate what happens next. We need to stop glorifying the struggle and start honoring the transformation. Struggle is part of the story, yes. But it's not the point. The point is what it teaches you, what it unlocks in you, what it asks you to become. If you're still here, still standing, still trying, that alone says something powerful about you. But don't stop at surviving. Don't build your identity around the wounds. Build it around the strength you've discovered because of them. Build it around what you're willing to do next. Because the next chapter is where you show the world what you're really made of. You don't need people to feel sorry for what you've been through. You need people to see what you've done with it. That's where your leadership begins. Not in the pain itself, but in the process of choosing to use it, shape it, and turn it into something others can grow from. And in doing so, you give others permission to do the same. When someone sees you take your past and use it to become something better, stronger, more honest, they start to believe they can too. That's how the world changes. Not from the top down, but from the inside out. From people who take what broke them and turn it into something that builds others. So remember this, your worth is not in what hurt you. It's in what you built in spite of it. You are not your pain. You are the architect of what comes after. You are not the broken thing. You are the builder. And what you build next, that's the real story. We live in a world full of stories. Everywhere you look, someone is telling one. Online, in conversations, in boardrooms, in the mirror. Stories about who they are, what they've been through, why things didn't work out, why they're still trying, or why they stopped trying. And stories matter. They help us make sense of things. They shape identity, create meaning, and allow us to connect. But there's a hard truth many of us avoid because it makes us uncomfortable. While stories connect, results move things forward. Stories are how we explain. Results are how we earn trust. It's easy to get caught up in telling people what we're going through, how hard we're working, what's been in our way. And sometimes that feels fair because we want people to see the effort, the intent, the background. We want the world to understand the context. But the world, for the most part, doesn't reward context. It rewards what gets done. Not because it's cold or heartless, but because impact matters more than intention when it comes to moving things forward. You can have the best idea, the clearest plan, a beautiful dream, but if it never turns into action, into something tangible, no one remembers. Because dreams don't change things. Execution does. Not everyone needs to know what it cost you. Not everyone needs the backstory. Sometimes the most powerful way to prove what you've overcome is to show them what you've built from it. The people who change the game, who rise above, who lead with clarity, they understand this. They don't spend their lives trying to get people to understand how much they're trying. They spend their energy getting results that speak for them. Not because they don't have a story, but because they've learned that their impact is the loudest story of all. You don't need to convince people of your worth when your work makes it undeniable. You don't need to explain your potential when your execution makes it clear. And you don't need everyone to understand your process when your results make the path obvious. You don't have to be loud about what you're building. You just have to keep building. This doesn't mean your story is irrelevant. Far from it. It's just that your story gains power after you've built something with it. The painful past without transformation is just pain. But when you use that pain to fuel change, to drive results, then the story becomes inspiring. Then people listen. Because now there's proof. You've taken something intangible and turned it into something real. That's what people trust. Not words, not effort, outcome. So much of our energy is spent trying to explain why we're almost there, why we should be further along, why things could have been different. But the time we spend explaining is often time we should be spending building. You don't need to be defended, you need to be consistent. You don't need sympathy, you need traction. You might be tired, you might feel like no one sees the late nights, the hard choices, the things you've walked away from to stay focused. That's okay. Let them sleep on you, let them doubt. Let them misunderstand your silence. Because if you stay steady, if you keep doing the work, there will come a time when the results make all the noise for you. It's tempting to want recognition now, to want people to validate your vision early. But the people worth reaching aren't moved by potential, they're moved by proof. And that's not a bad thing, it's actually a gift. Because it means you don't have to spend your life trying to persuade anyone. You just have to build something they can't ignore. That's the power of quiet work, of heads down commitment, of showing up every day even when the results haven't come yet. It's the discipline of staying focused when the story would be easier to tell than the work would be to do. It's easy to talk about where you're going, harder to build the bridge. But the bridge is what matters. That's what takes you forward. That's what others can walk across one day and say, they did this. They actually built something. And when the results come, because they will, if you keep showing up, they'll carry weight. Not because you demanded attention, but because you earned it. Not because you were the loudest in the room, but because your work spoke for itself. That's leadership. That's influence. Quiet, consistent, honest execution. You don't have to shout about who you are when your results make it obvious. You don't have to tell people what you value and it shows up in what you create. You don't have to demand respect when you build something that commands it. That's what it means to lead by example. This isn't about suppressing your voice. It's about amplifying it through what you do. Let the work talk. Let the change speak. Let the consistency be the message. And when people finally ask, how did you do it? That's when the story matters. Because now it's backed by substance. Now they're ready to listen. Because now they see. And then here's the beautiful part. The more you focus on results, the stronger your story becomes. Not because you've polished it, but because you've lived it. You didn't need to shout to be heard. You didn't need to beg to be seen. You just kept building. And that kind of story, it doesn't need to be explained. It's felt. So stop asking for permission. Stop waiting for someone to tell you it's your time. It's your time when you decide it is. When you choose to let the result tell the story. When you wake up and say, they'll see it when it's done. That's the beginning of something real. And in the end, when they finally come around, when they recognize what you built, they'll ask about your journey, about what it cost, what about what it took. And that's when you'll tell them the story. Not to be understood, but to remind them that the results they admire didn't come from noise. They came from quiet, focused, relentless work. Let your story be a whisper. Let your results be the roar.